In his statement just a few days ago, Keir Starmer accepted the catastrophic failure by the state to protect the victims of the Southport horrific attack. He also announced the launch of a public inquiry, but he also said that they couldn't report key details of the case for fear of collapsing the trial. Now, not just myself, but many others don't seem to understand or accept that that was right, and still feel that a lot of the details were covered up and that the way that it was reported was wrong. And I'm going to give you an example in this video of another incident. There are many incidents I could choose. I've picked one to cover one piece of reporting on one incident to give you a contrast. Now, this was the statement referred, I'll link this below, by Keir Starmer, where he says he will not let any institution of the state deflect from their failure. Failure which in this case frankly leaps off the page, he said. For example, he says the perpetrator was referred to prevent 3 separate occasions, and yet on each of these occasions judgment was made that he did not meet the threshold for intervention. A judgment that was clearly wrong and which failed those families. But then what he also said is that had he or anyone else revealed the crucial details whilst the case was being built and waiting for a verdict, then this vile individual would have walked away a free man. Now, there are 2 ways of looking at this. First of all, that was always a possibility. If they released key details, it might risk the trial, and that would have been devastating. On the other hand, key details, factual details that they knew could have been released to prevent the speculation and ultimately the civil unrest that we saw over the summer, which sadly then led to violent disorder and riots and so on. Obviously not condoning any of that. But as I said, I'm going to give you an example in this video of very different reporting of a different event, which did give lots of details right at the beginning, and you'll see exactly what I mean. But I'll also talk about why there's a reluctance to label this as a terrorist incident. And I think not only the state has failed here, but I think the law fails as well. But first of all, if you're new to me, I'm Daniel Smith, a barrister of England and Wales. I'd be really grateful if you subscribe to the channel. I tirelessly dig away at finding things to give you a different context on these things, explain the law and how it applies to current events. So I'm really grateful if you subscribe. So let's look first of all at the DPP's response. First of all, in short, the only bit that I want to highlight here is they said that releasing the information earlier would have put the trial at risk. That's always a risk. But in a modern day and age, people will find things out, whether they are officially reported or not. And arguably, it's better that they are officially stated to clarify any misinformation, even if it is, this is what is believed to be the case, this is what is alleged to be the case, etc. So that ultimately, the ultimate jury trial will be directed properly by a judge and therefore cut through any misinformation that may have circulated. I believe that is a possibility, and we should trust the jury to do that. Now, I'll come back to information that was found about this attacker in a moment. First of all, a contrasting story. Let's go back to 2017 and the horrific Finsbury Park attack by Darren Osborne, which was reported here in The Guardian. There are other, I'm not picking on The Guardian, there were a number of news reports about this. This was just one that I found. Many of them, I think, reported similar things, but this dated June 20th, 2017. Remembering, of course, he was found guilty of this offence on the 1st of February 2018, and this is the then Home Secretary response to the sentencing then. But coming back to the reporting, this was in June 2017, when he was still a suspect in this attack. Now remember, this is what was reported at the time. At this point, he'd been arrested, and we'll come back in a moment to an article where he'd been charged. And so there were further comments made when he was charged. Again, I'll stick with The Guardian so there's some consistency here. So let's have a look at the few things that were said at the point of arrest and then at the point of charge, just so you can get an idea of what was reported then. All the while bearing in mind what some people call a cover-up about the Southport incident, what I just prefer to call a choice of release of information which may have been misguided. But let's have a look at this. So, headline: Finsbury Park suspect made abusive remarks about Palestinian march. So right from the headline there's a big bold statement which might give an inclination as to ideology, which is important when we come back a bit later in this video to talk about terrorism and why they're reluctant to categorize the Southport attacker incident as a terrorist incident. Let's read on. It says here, the suspect, and now obviously we're talking about Darren Osborne here, at the time a suspect, the suspect in this attack allegedly made abusive and aggressive comments about pro-Palestinian rally that took place in London hours before he drove into the crowd of worshippers. He's said to have made remarks about the Al-Quds Day march, which is often targeted by far-right activists, the night before he drove from Cardiff to London. Police using CCTV to look for evidence, etc. They'll be able to work out if he was at or near the rally, which is organised by the IHRC. Some more bits in yellow are what I would consider evidential stuff. It's now believed, The Guardian reported at the time, that he hired a van used in the attack several days before leaving for London, slept in it the night before he departed. South Wales confirmed they found him sleeping in the van after a neighbour phoned them. They judged no offence had been committed, so they took no action. All of this would be part of a story that would be put before a court. Further details emerged of his erratic behaviour in the days, this is the bit in the middle, in the days and weeks before the attack. Some neighbours said that he visited the family where his partner and 4 children lived, didn't stay overnight, he sometimes slept in a tent nearby. According to the witness at Finsbury Park, he shouted, "I want to kill all Muslims," and he drove a van into the crowd in the early hours of the morning. This goes on. Lots more detail given out here. Camera phone footage showed him being captured by worshippers who attacked him as he screamed, "Kill me." When he was eventually arrested and loaded on the back of a police van in handcuffs, he gestured to the crowd. But it says here there's no immediate evidence that he was an active member of a far-right organisation. He was not known by the security services, but police are continuing to search the home of it. So lots more details. Then it says he appeared to have a Twitter account, which he has never used to send his own tweets, instead monitoring 32 other users. And again, it's thought that he hired the van from a company towards the end of the week. One neighbour, it reports, said that he'd seen the van on a road nearby the home. All of this evidence that would have come out in court, which might be key in a trial. He said, "Darren used to park his old cars here because there's not much space on the street." Then this van appeared. As soon as I saw what happened in Finsbury Park, I recognised the van. Again, that would be witness testimony. Mary Cook, whose home looks on the road, said she'd seen the van appear 3 or 4 days before the attack. I looked out one time and he was in the van on the phone. The next morning, the van had gone. And this goes on and on, this report. A lengthy article, giving all sorts of details and information. The pub manager, it says, he came in, was very political with everyone he spoke to. I didn't like it one bit, so I asked him to leave, but he was pretty surly to the boy, so stood in front of him and told him in no uncertain terms to go. A well-placed source alleged to The Guardian that he'd specifically spoken about the rally. Again, detail after detail, all of which reported, and this was at the point of arrest. As I say, he was eventually arrested and loaded onto the back of a police van in handcuffs. So lots of reporting about this, lots of detail. If we move forward to another article, this is at the point he had been charged. He appeared in court being charged with terrorism-related murder and attempted murder following this van attack. And although much less detail in this article, because they do quote and say the Crown Prosecution Service reminds all concerned that criminal proceedings are live and he has a right to a fair trial, it's extremely important there should be no reporting, commentary or sharing of information online which could in any way prejudice ongoing proceedings. This is the warning that I always give to you. But remember, proceedings are live from the point of arrest, and at this point they are reporting that he'd been arrested, and yet reporting all of this detail as to what he's supposed to have said, what his movements were supposed to have been, etc. Even this article here where he's been charged, it still says here, ironically, directly after this warning not to report on this and not to comment on this, says the attack, which was apparently directed at the Muslim community, sparked pleas for community solidarity. The police and government viewed it as the 4th terrorist attack in Britain since March. So you can see there's lots of reporting of lots of details from, this is just one outlet, although 2 articles from one outlet, The Guardian. But lots of details there. And nobody then sought to question whether that would prejudice a trial. And frankly, I don't think it would either, just for the avoidance of doubt. But I don't think that would, because a properly directed jury would be able to discern what was just rumour and disregard the rest, and only try the case according to the evidence presented in court. And that is what a judge would direct them to do. And so coming back to the Southport attack, right from the beginning, Detective Chief Inspector Jason Pye said that he wanted this to be declared a terror attack. He said that this should have been declared terrorism from the beginning, which meant that they would have had longer to question him, longer to determine what the motive and ideology was, if anything. And without that, the CPS would be unable to prosecute it as an act of terrorism without one clear, defined ideology. Now, for that, again, we have to jump into the Terrorism Act a little bit here, which says, any act here that involves serious violence or damage to property or endangers life, creates serious health risk, etc., all of those things, if they are based on anything that is designed to influence government or an international government or intimidate the public or section of the public, and it is based on advancing either one of these things, either advancing a political, religious, racial, or ideological cause. And that is the reason, and that is the point, that they refused to categorize this as a terrorist incident. Now, the fact that he was found with materials meant obviously he was charged with a terrorism offence. Being in possession of that material did not require the motivation or to prove any purpose, whether political, religious, racial, or ideological at all. Just the possession of those materials amounted to an offence. So he was charged with that offence and ultimately pleaded guilty to that offence. But for the act itself, the law, and this is why I think the law fails here, the law requires to have a direct link or proof of motivation of one of these purposes. And without that, they couldn't declare it a terrorist incident. But if they could, then obviously the police then have longer to question, and it will be prosecuted as such. But for the avoidance of doubt, Yvette Cooper said it is being treated, or he is being treated as a terrorist prisoner in custody. But there are lots of different ways that this could have been handled and treated if the law allowed, and Keir Starmer has hinted that the law needs to be adapted somewhat to cater for loners, misfits, and these sort of individuals that don't fit the usual description that we would otherwise label as being part of a terrorist group. And whilst, of course, I can't override the expertise of everybody that spent countless thousands of hours looking at all of this material to try to establish one motive or another, in my view, in my mind, it simply has to be motivated in one way or another by one of those motives, whether it be political, racial, ideological, or whatever. Because when you look at the volume of material here, whilst there may not be one absolute conclusive direct link, one message saying this is why I'm doing it, or anything that says this is why he was doing it, all of these documents, they say 1,655 documents received and processed, interviewed 547 witnesses, 405 statements, 80 pieces of CCTV, recovered 164,000 documents from digital devices, 159,000 messages, and a total of 1,244 exhibits. They say that what they can say from all of that is that no one ideology was uncovered. Certainly it would have spanned many different ideologies. And what they could say clearly is that he had an obsession with war, genocide, and extreme violence. One of the videos related to a bishop in Sydney, an attack upon a bishop in Sydney. They also discovered lots of books on war and genocide, including obviously the Al-Qaeda training material. And ultimately, the Detective Chief Inspector said that he had a wide range of literature and guides, he says, spanned every religion from anti-Islam to Islam. And the key difference being that if they had have treated it as an act of terrorism, they'd have had up to 14 days without charge to question him, rather than the standard 72 hours. He said, all day long, I'd have been happy to say that it's a terrorist attack. And once they found the Al-Qaeda training material, he had said, is this not terrorism now? However, they then said that there was still not one single ideology that was clear, and so that incident itself wasn't declared a terrorist incident. But what I really can't understand is clips like this, where somebody is clearly speaking to Sky News, giving their view, and the journalist appears to ask the producer to cut the conversation off early. Listen to this.
No doubt in my mind, had people done their job better in the last few years in relation to this man, those girls would still be alive.
So that seems like quite a clear instruction to cut the feed or to cut the interviewee off. This is exactly what people are frustrated about. In my humble view, I think people are frustrated when their voices are not heard, when they are not told the truth, or they are not given the information that they know is out there, they know has been reported, when there are other examples where information has been reported but being told that they can't be told this information. So I think that's what people are upset about. So I thought this was worth the contrast, but in many ways the system here has failed. I think the law has failed, the reporting has failed, and I think lots of it needs a major overhaul. Let me know what you think respectfully, please, in the comment section below. Please do like the video and subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.